And we are live with another episode of the Keeg Talks. Today, the Keeg Talks, the new history of the DC Universe, issue number 2. Now, normally, Comic Talk is the show brought to you by the Keeg, where we talk about comic books. Now, Comic Talk is specifically devoted every Thursday, 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern, to talk about all the comics that came out that week, right? And so, the Keeg Talks is a little bit more dedicated to movies, film, and then or movies, film, TV shows, but also things that are impactful to like geek culture and fandom. And I think this comic miniseries, which is the new history of the DC universe, needs their own devoted episodes to each issue, because for those of you who don't know, this 4-issue miniseries that's out in comic shops now. Go to comicshoplocator.com, find a comic shop near you. But this 4-issue miniseries is setting up the timeline of the DC universe of the comics. Not the movies, but the comics. And there's a lot that has happened in the past 100 years with DC Comics, almost 100 years. So we're breaking it all down. I'm your host, Dimithri Pereira. If you're watching us live, you are watching us on youtube.com/The Keeg Show, or you're listening to the podcast wherever you get your podcast from, Apple Podcasts, Google, whatever, Spotify, iHeartRadio. We're on all of that. But it's not just me talking to myself. It's another DC fan that's here to talk about issue number 2 that was also here on the issue number 1 episode. We got Jack Kelly, aka The Film Field. Jack, welcome back, man.
Thanks for having me back. Yeah, I'm excited to get into this one. I was really hype about the first one. The second one's also very exciting. So let's get into it.
Yeah. We had a previous episode about issue number 1, and there are new issues every single month. And so the way this comic works is writer Mark Waid, he has different artists on each of the different titles, but writer Mark Waid is essentially trying to make sense of all these DC retcons and reboots and everything. So what's your familiarity? I mean, we're going to take it back. Maybe we repeat some of the questions we talked about on the first episode of this. What's your experience with DC reboots and retcons and whatnot as a DC Comics reader?
Yeah, so I'm somebody who's extremely interested in the overall cosmology and timeline of DC. So for a while, I've been somebody that's been actually very interested in the reboots. I know a lot of people typically look at those reboots and go, "Man, this is where it gets confusing for me," or if I'm a newer reader, this is where I have the most questions. For me, I like looking back at those reboots as almost sections of the overall DC timeline. I look at those reboots as very important milestones for the overall story of DC. And so I would constantly go back and read as much as I can of Crisis on Infinite Earths, Infinite Crisis, all these other things. And so I became very interested in the general history and cosmology of what was going on. So this entire idea of going over and trying to make sense of it all was really interesting to me, because I'm somebody who already goes out of their way to try to make sense of the little things. All the little things that could be considered, retcons, weird little problems here. I try to go through and make sense of those things so that it all makes sense in my head, because it is a lot. It is a lot of history with a lot of messiness, and it is fun but confusing.
Do you feel, and the way DC and Marvel both deal with continuity is a little bit different, and I mean we'll get into that. But here's the question: do you feel that readers, new readers, old readers, should be worried about continuity?
I really actually don't. And this is coming from somebody who does truly love that continuity. I think that that continuity does mean something to me a lot in terms of this big, broad story being told of the whole DC universe. But I think that there's a lot of elements of what DC is that, and just stories in general, that don't need that continuity. We talked about the last episode, and it really is for me something where I think that having an understanding of that overall timeline and overall consistency of what has happened to this character and where we are now is really important and can help build to bigger storylines and just elements of enjoying the character that you're reading, whatever it may be, the story, etc. But also, I think that you can enjoy them individually. I think that you can go through and read Scott Snyder's Batman, and then from there go and read like Zdarsky's. I think that these are things where even if there are things that are confusing for you, you'll pick up on pieces. And even through that, I think that generally there's a lot of comics that start from a random starting point anyways in the character's life, that I think you pick up on the pieces yourself, and the story itself can still work. I think that there's plenty of room for you to just kind of dive head first and pick up the pieces that might be a little bit confusing for you on the way through the story.
I personally call myself a continuity whore. I need it. I need it all the time. I need continuity, whether it's Marvel, whether it's DC. In my head, I am coming up with my own like head canon, but I know in my heart of hearts that my head canon is not necessarily real canon, right? And so
Yeah.
some people can't they got to figure out what that distinction is. Some people are like their head canon is real canon and okay, whatever. Death of the author, I guess, in a way, but um Marvel deals with continuity a little bit different than DC. Marvel has a sliding timeline, which means Fantastic Four came out in like 1962 or whatever. Ever since 1962, all those stories are in continuity, but with a caveat, which is it the events of the comics, maybe not the specifics, like Spider-Man meeting Richard Nixon or whatever, like those events slide forward in time. So you're essentially dealing with like the present minus however many years, as opposed to these things have taken place on these specific years. DC doesn't do that. DC started off as multiple characters across multiple titles in different companies, even, and slowly the gravity of it and corporate, whatever takeovers brought all these comics together, and it was hard for DC to create like a cohesive universe. So they explained it all in the multiverse. They said all these like the Shazam, Captain Marvel type books, those were all on a different Earth. Then Superman that fought in World War II is a different Superman that was present in like the 60s, 70s, like that Superman. There were two different, there was like older one and a younger one. They're on two different Earths. Like that's the way they did it, and then they realized it's too much, so they did Crisis on Infinite Earths and did a whole franchise-wide, company-wide reboot. And then ever since then, they've been like slowly retconning, and they haven't really had a hard enough reboot since New 52. So like Crisis on Infinite Earths is like 1986, I think. New 52 was 2010, I think. And so I know you have thoughts about New 52. I didn't like it. I know there were some good titles on it, but it was, at the very least, it was mismanaged and poorly planned past the idea of get a lot of money off of people buying number one issues. You were a fan of New 52, right?
So I was somebody who had titles that they enjoyed. Like I think that the things that were general, things stayed the same for the character. Not much was different, but we're not gonna, have the need to hyper focus on things in the past. Things like Green Lantern and Snyder's Batman. Those were things I thoroughly enjoyed. And I didn't even dislike New 52 Flash. I think there was elements there that I liked. So for me, it was like hits and misses. Areas where I'm like, oh, I like that. Other areas where I'm like, okay, this is changing way too much from the norm that I can appreciate this for an awkward moment within the DC universe as an awkward timeline change. But as like a hey, we want this to be the future of DC, I was like, I'm not a big fan of this. So it was very much hit or miss creative choices for changing things for the characters. For me, I would say.
Yeah. I I as a longtime DC fan, and also the idea that like you can be a DC reader and a DC fan and not have to really care about the lore as much. You could read things like that's okay. You're not a better or truer DC fan if you're reading for a longer amount of time, or you're not, or you're reading for like continuity. Like it doesn't matter. Like enjoy DC the way you want it. Like you're an ice cream fan whether you eat it in a cone or a cup, or whether you eat it once a week or once a year. Like you still like ice cream. If you like vanilla ice cream, there's vanilla ice cream for you. Like there's, it is what it is. Um, but with DC, what has happened recently is this kind of return to form where they're like, well, there are really good things that have happened in the past story wise that we want to bring back into continuity or exclaim that from the rooftops, it's back to being in continuity. Like we want this as part of the timeline. So they've kind of, since the New 52, been merging timelines kind of back in to try to create a cohesive continuity, though there are sort of contradictions. So I think that's what this series, I was really excited when this series was announced, 4-issue miniseries. Once again, go to comicshoplocator.com, find a comic shop near you, pick up issues 1 and 2 out now, and then 3 and 4 come out the next month and the month after, or this month and the month after. But Mark Waid, amazing writer. I'm glad that he's the one writing this, and he's trying to make sense of everything.
Yeah, and I think it's really interesting too because I would say generally with the way that DC handles reboots, at least for me, I think that there is something there where typically everybody I ask like, "Hey, do you read a lot of DC comics? What do you get into?" For them, it is that big concern of, "Oh, but there's a lot of reboots, right?" And that makes things messy. The thing that I found very interesting about DC is that they do try to make those reboots feel very much important to the overall narrative and not just a thing that happened for readers to understand things. They truly make it something that is important to the narrative of DC. Like
Yeah,
Crisis on Infinite Earths, it's something that affected everybody with things that are talked about to this day, with characters who didn't get affected, who understand what's going on. Characters like Dr. Fate, who knew that the timeline changed. So many things that make the reboots feel incredibly important to these characters. So they're not just, hey, this awkward change, we're like, what does that even mean? Sometimes the characters acknowledge these changes, or a character get brought back, and we have these moments of, hey, I don't know you. I mean, I always look back to that moment in Rebirth with Wally West coming back, and it makes that reboot of the New 52 and all this stuff with Dr. Manhattan truly important. It makes it an actual narrative piece, which I think works as a really good strength actually for DC in ways where if people are introduced to these comics and they're like, hey, this is kind of confusing, it's like, I do agree, and maybe you'll find your footing, but you'll find that actually these reboots, they're pretty important on a narrative level to what is going on. I mean, even Dark Crisis was something that brought back tons and tons of stuff. I mean, like going down from every single villain, the empty hand from Multiversity that Grant Morrison did, all this stuff is incredibly important. So I think that from all of these different writers like Joshua Williamson and Scott Snyder building on these elements and making all these reboots important and talking about all the past stuff, Wade's doing a really good job of also attacking that and making things make sense. Talking about Perpetua, talking about the Anti-Monitor, making it all concise in a way where readers can go back and check on things and go, this is kind of confusing to me. Oh, at the back of these pages, I can see exactly what they're talking about. Oh, they skimmed over this. Oh, wait, I can actually go back and see exactly what they're talking about. I think that he's done a very good job just picking up right where those writers left off of just trying to make all of this make sense, especially make sense on a narrative level.
yeah. It used to be said that writers from DC Comics, they were told, if a writer was like, I have a question about this character, who do I talk to? And they're like, you just talk to Mark Waid. Like
Yeah.
he's the writer's writer, right? And
Yeah.
like the fact that he has had such an amazing career for decades and he's still cranking out amazing stuff. Like he is the seamstress right now for this miniseries. But here, I think some of the materials, they're not his ideas necessarily. I think that DC editorial, I'm sure some of the ideas that Mark Waid came up with, like he was like, "Hey, DC editorial, this is what I got," and they're like, "Okay." And then I'm sure some of the DC editorial was like, "Put this in, mention this rando character," and he's like, "Oh,
Mhm.
okay." And I'm sure other writers are probably like, they either go to DC editorial or go to straight to Mark Waid, and they're like, "Hey, can you drop something about like Blue Devil? Because I'm gonna do something Blue Devil later, like just like tease him a little bit, you know?"
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that especially guys like Wade have done a really good job of bringing all these pieces together in a way that there was a lot of these pieces, like, the empty hand, all the stuff that Grant Morrison tackled. Those things have, especially over the past, I would say, like 3 or 4 years, been really relevant. Like, we've really brought those elements back of like the bigger DC universe and stuff like that. I mean, even down to like the way we talk about like Perpetua and all these things. Scott
You
Snyder
really
did
love
that.
Perpetua.
It's funny. I have a messy feel. I have a messy opinion about Perpetua. I like it. I don't like it, but I do really like it in some ways.
Yeah.
I just think it's a nice, like, it's a nice way to make that aspect of DC make sense to new readers. Because beforehand, what Morrison was doing with it was fantastic, but it was very confusing. I would not blame anyone if they really could not understand it. And I think bringing in Perpetua was like a nice way of like, I'm not going to change anything, but this character can just kind of work so he can be like, big bad evil lady. She makes sense. She's got these evil sons. And it's like, okay, all right, that's a little bit more clear. So I appreciate that it's sort of just like a nice palate cleanser for like, this is confusing, big bad evil lady, just go with it.
Yeah. I mean, at
Yeah.
certain points of continuity, you do have to just be like, it's a meta fiction kind of situation where the writers of that universe, the gods of that universe, are the writers in our world writing those books. Like, if that makes you sleep better at night, sure, go right
Yeah.
ahead. I'm not personally a fan of any tier higher than like the mythological gods that we know. So like, I don't personally like in Marvel like Eternity or the Living Tribunal. Like, I don't care. I do not care about these people that are like, they're bigger than Galactus. They're just like cosmic entities, and then for some reason people online want them to fight, and it's like, that's not how. These are like aspects that are beyond our comprehension. These are, and so DC also has some of those characters that I'm like, oh well, okay, moving on. Like, I'm cool with
Yeah.
Sandman and like the Endless, because there's a finite amount of Endless. They're like, these are the Endless. They're named this. This is what they manage, and they also kind of work with the mythology and whatever of like the gods and whatever in DC. So anyway, this issue as we get into this nitty gritty, this issue takes place right after issue 1. Now we talked about how issue 1 starts off with the Big Bang. Well, let me rewind it a little bit there. Barry Allen has been charting the timeline. This book is quote unquote written by Barry Allen, the Flash, the second Flash. And he's writing it. So the way I see it is like, any mistakes in the book that are like considered mistakes later, it's Barry's fault. Whatever, it doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
It is what it is. But it starts off with essentially the Big Bang, your girl Perpetua, all that stuff, and then it goes into the Endless. It goes into like all the like new gods, fourth world stuff. Then it like goes into like Vandal Savage on Earth. It goes into the Knights in Shining Armor, then to the Wild West, blah 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 blah. Goes into World War II. Then it ends issue 1 with Krypton explodes.
Yeah. And then it's really nice because then we kind of just get right into the fold of all of these mainline heroes. Obviously, the Justice League talking about the Justice Society and all of those things. And I think this was a very clean and concise way of doing this, because I think my biggest question was, how do you tackle that big chunk of history without over explaining too much, hyper focusing on one thing, and then kind of leaving some other things with very little information. But I think that Way did a really good job balancing it all and just focusing on the origins, focusing on what you need to know when they're happening. And especially, I think a very interesting thing to me was just the way that they decided to tackle like the new 52 elements of the Justice League in this overall timeline.
Right.
Yeah, because we get to this really interesting moment of addressing Cyborg and what his role was.
Yeah.
And it's apparently that he fights Darkseid along them, like we saw in the New 52, but then he's sort of in like stasis from injuries, which is a really interesting way of going about Cyborg to me.
Yeah. I mean, we could jump into that. Just this issue starts off with essentially Superman, those heroes, doing what they need to do, and then it ends with Crisis on Infinite Earths, which I have a lot of questions about that, but we'll get to that in order. But yes, what this issue is trying to do is like all these different, let's just say, first stories of like the Justice League. What's the first mission the Justice League was ever doing? Same with like Teen Titans. There's a lot of superhero teams in this issue, and they're trying to figure out where were those teams when bad things happened, and then also like they're trying to figure out like what's the definitive continuity for the origins of this team. So yeah, you bring up the Justice League fighting Darkseid, and what's kind of cool is the page where they're fighting Darkseid for the first time, they're not in New 52 costumes. They are
Yeah.
in their original costumes. So you could say that like they start off like a lot of these heroes start off their careers in more spandexy outfits, and then maybe like 5 years ago in their continuity they like moved to like armored stuff because like it was kind of the trend, and then now they're back to like whatever current comics are, right? But
Yeah.
like it is interesting because they're fighting Darkseid, and it says aware of the sudden emergence of so many defenders of humanity, Darkseid does like a preemptive strike on Earth, which is exactly kind of what happens in the New 52 Justice League #1, right? Like that
Yeah.
first arc. The problem with that is, yeah, it puts Cyborg as a founding member of the Justice League. And it also rewrites what was then the definitive origin, which is JLA Year One, written by Mark Waid, which I grew up with. I have like a tattered copy because I read it over and over and over again when I was younger. It's written by Mark Waid. Amazing start, but the teams aren't the same. The enemies aren't the same of these two origin stories, and Mark Waid had to figure out how do I make them both make sense.
Yeah, and it's interesting, especially when you're tackling the Justice League, because especially in a big timeline point of view, there's a lot of things that can go left unsaid and things you can assume. Like there's a lot of elements of, oh, when did this guy join? You know, when did this guy do this? When did they fight this villain? And you can be like, oh, well, we can just generally say it happened maybe a year after, maybe a few months. Like there's generally things that you can assume and place down. When it comes to that first battle or how they united, that's a very integral one. And I think it's very interesting to end up going with the new 52 version of it because it seems like this emphasis, at least in some kind of way, of reminding people of the importance of Darkseid within this timeline of things. And I do think that that's very interesting, especially with what we have going on in general for DC with the Absolute Universe and just in general, just kind of bringing back the emphasis of what Darkseid is. So I do think that that's a very interesting choice. And not only that, but just specifically bringing in Cyborg and making him a founding member. Because I think that that's obviously a decision where it felt like the easier option would just to be like, oh, well, he came on a little bit later on. He was part of the Teen Titans, and then he eventually went over to here. But this is a much more like really cutting into the meat and saying, no, he was there. He just was in stasis afterwards after injuries, and it just creates a very interesting picture about where Cyborg is during all these moments of the Justice League rising up as a team and so many members joining.
Yeah, and also how much older is he than the rest of the Teen Titans? Because
Yes, yeah,
if Batman, if let's just say Cyborg was 18 when he fought with the Justice League, it'd be weird if he was younger, like the Justice League teaming up with like some kid robot that joined up. But like, let's just say he's 18, but like this is the beginning of Batman's career, right? So Dick Grayson is 13. So like, sure,
yeah.
maybe we could do a Victor Stone is 5 years older than Dick Grayson, but like, I don't buy that.
Yeah, that's the thing. And it's just kind of like these age ranges now for him. It's just in a very awkward spot where, like, I get it. He's a cyborg. Maybe you can kind of, BS some stuff of like, oh, well, because of like what seems to still be the dark side, you know, uh parademon apocalyptic material stuff for cyborg still to be his origin. Like if that's the case, maybe something caused him to have a longer like age range or
Yeah,
a longer life, something like that. And we'll obviously get to what they reveal about what team he joins later on, but it creates a very muddy area, at least for me, where I'm like, all right, I'm sure we can explain this. It's just now way weirder. It's just now in a much weirder spot where I'm like, is he just like a grown man with the Teen Titans? Like, is he
right.
just like, is he a complete grown man now? I don't know. It's a little odd. I think they address it in a fine way. Obviously, we'll get
Yeah,
to that a little bit later, but it's definitely one that throws you for a loop where it felt like maybe Cyborg being a later on addition would have been smoother. But I can see why they went this route. To me, it feels very much like a establishing Darkseid as that first villain for the ultimate purpose of showing his importance in the ultimate like broader scheme of DC. Because already I think even in the first issue they made that important. And I think here they want that to be just as important, especially making it obviously still tied to Cyborg's origin.
yeah.
I can see why that choice was made.
I have never liked the idea of Cyborg being a Justice League founder. It just, other than the age thing, which I only realized with this issue, I was never really a fan of Cyborg joining the Justice League because first things first, he's always been a Titan to me, and I think that he should always be a Titan. I'm not saying that like none of the Titans should move up, but they do move up. But Cyborg starting off with the Justice League is weird to me.
Mhm.
It'd be like Beast Boy starting off with the Justice League because they needed an animal for a mission, and they were like, Beast Boy, join the Justice League, and then he joins the Teen Titans. It's just weird to me, you know.
Yeah.
But Cyborg, I mean, I understand in the New 52 why they wanted it because they wanted, you know, Barry Allen to start off the New 52 as the Flash. They wanted to bring back the Silver Age, which was Hal Jordan, Barry Allen, like essentially an all-white Justice League, which, you
Yeah.
know, um, uh, was the standard back in the day, right? But like now, New 52, 2010, they're like, let's not only like vary the power set, let's include at least one. It's funny. They're like at least one
Yeah.
person of color. Like they have Wonder Woman, so they're like, I guess woman checked off.
Yeah.
Um, that being said, like the Justice League cartoon, I think is a much better lineup. For everything, like everything that you want in a Justice League is in the Justice League cartoon starting lineup.
Yeah,
You
and
know,
it's a really interesting one for me too because I'm somebody I'm a big Hal Jordan fan. He's one of my favorite characters of all time.
and
I
that's where
do.
we differ. But that's okay.
Yeah, he's yeah. No, I get it. He for me, I think he is one of the most important characters to DC. I think he's so interesting.
Yeah.
I think that I think he's somebody who I always want to be on a main Justice League team. I'm a big fan of John Stewart. I love John Stewart. However, I do think that he's a character that with the shows and animated content gets a bit more hype there than he does in the comics because ultimately the comics don't have a lot of very strong John Stewart stories. War Journalist, fantastic, but that's a very newer story when you're looking at the grand scheme of it all. Not a lot of stuff, not a lot of bad stuff, just a lot of fine stuff, right?
Yeah.
Guy Gardner, really fun Lantern, not a guy you expect to be on a main Justice League roster. Kyle Rayner is typically the guy I go, all right, if you're looking for diversity and you want to get this team a bit more diverse, I always lean towards Kyle for that guy if you don't want Hal because of the character that he is. And I think that he's a very important character, especially for Morrison's JLA. I think that that was obviously a home run.
Yeah.
So he's the character that I look at as like, oh, if you're trying to get diverse, that's wide now. And when it comes to like Cyborg, of course, it makes sense that it's like, hey, we need a person of color. Who's it going to be? And it's just one of those weird spots where it's like, I don't know. I think if you want that so bad, maybe make a few changes to having maybe Hawkgirl part of that team. Go for like Kendra Saunders, you know what I mean? And then have like Kyle Rayner, like these, like you can change those elements and have a diverse team without having to bring Cyborg all the way over here. I didn't think that it just felt like a choice where I'm not against it. It's just felt a little bit not well thought out. It didn't feel like they thought about the other options very well.
I think, yeah. And they tied his origin into Darkseid, which I don't love, but I don't hate now.
Me neither.
I'm just like, whatever, it is what it is. And then the movie, the Justice League Snyder movie, used that origin, which is the boom tube and the mother box and whatnot. But
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I think with the New 52, they also didn't want to race swap. You know, for better or for worse. I mean, I think that if you're gonna reboot the DC, like there are certain characters you can.
Yeah.
But like maybe they didn't want to race swap, and I mean, yeah, the Justice League cartoon did the most for John Stewart because John Stewart wasn't as fleshed out in the comics up until that point. Like he had his things, but like it was weird. John Stewart wasn't the military guy in the comics
No.
until the cartoon came out and they made him the badass military guy. Hal Jordan was technically the ex-military test pilot, right? And John Stewart was the architect.
Yeah, and it's interesting to see how that change has affected him going forward because you've seen that become such a staple now of talking about that, and I'm so glad we have a few writers that really kind of smack that away and focus on the architect aspect of him.
Well, he's
Because I
both
mean,
now, right?
he is both. Now he's both. But I think it's treated in a way that feels much more sincere for a character that would be of those two different occupations.
Yeah.
I think the way that Ram V handled John Stewart currently right now in the New Gods books is really, really good. I think that's great stuff. Ram V just understands John Stewart really, really well. I encourage anybody to go read anything that Ram V does with John Stewart.
Yeah.
So I do think that John's a character that is becoming much more nuanced and much more interesting with all these great stories now than I think he has ever been before. So it's a funny thing to me where it's like, no, I do love John. I just think he's a bit boring. But now, like right now, he's becoming really interesting.
Yeah.
Now, like in this very past 2, 3 years, he's becoming a very, very interesting character.
Yeah. Um, I mean, we're just getting on this New 52 thing. I think New 52 took too many chances and didn't take enough chances at the same time. I thought it was neither here nor there. So, whereas Marvel at the time had the Marvel 616 comics and the Ultimate Marvel comics, DC was like, we're going to make we're not doing two universes, we're just doing one, and that's this. And then they did Earth 2, which was even more like out there and different and weird and fine. But it's just that's been tough. So I'm very happy for
Yeah.
this rewriting of the thing. So if we bring it back to Justice League, starting off their unofficial, you know what this reminds me of? This whole Justice League's unofficial start is like when you date someone and you have your anniversary from the day of your first date, but then you have your anniversary when you became official, you know? Or later when you get married,
Yeah.
you got your anniversary of like your wedding, right? And it's like this was the Justice League fighting, or no, it wasn't even the Justice League. It was Justice League. It was DC heroes fighting Darkseid, reminiscent of the Justice League.
Right. And I think it's a fun area too, where it's like, I want to bring it back to the point I made where it's like, it's easy to plot in assumptions of what these guys have been through and what they've already done and be like, oh, well, when did they fight? Insert this film. When did they do this? Oh, well, you can just assume it's a few months after, or
Yeah.
maybe it happened in between this moment. It's funny too, because they are an unofficial team right here. So you still have, at least I like the way that Wade puts this together, where it's like, you can maybe kind of assume maybe they fought bigger villains, like maybe not bigger than Darkseid, of course, but villains here or there before where maybe they've had team ups, and it kind of creates that, nice glue to be like, I'm sure a few of them have teamed up to do something together, but it's never been this big of a threat and this important of a united force. It hasn't been that yet. Because even like back with the New 52, some of them kind of knew of each other. They were all kind of operating. So it's that kind of thing where it's like, all right, there's still little mini assumptions I can make about little things where I might go, hey, back then in the Silver Age or whatever, is that still a canon? It's like, oh, you could kind of say so. Yeah, you can kind of still say that's a little buddy, moment between these two characters before they all went up against Darkseid. There's moments there I think that can still apply.
Also, Mark Waid's job with this is to write enough that you get a skeleton, but not flesh it out so that writers down the line are beholden to like a step-by-step first meeting, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so like he is purposely keeping things vague through Barry Allen's vagueness, right?
Yeah.
Like we could say that, what's it called, the literary concept that like the the narrator isn't always flawed narrator, false narrator.
It's something like false narrator. I
Yeah.
know exactly what you're saying here.
So it's like Barry Allen doesn't have to be 100% correct. It's just it's
Mm-hmm.
his, like later on they might be like some new threat, and then they're like, this was never in this series, and it was like Barry was like, I didn't know, like, you
Yeah,
know.
and that's what I appreciate is like you can come back to these moments and truly take what is ultimately still like a way for readers to understand the DC universe better, but then also come back and be like, all right, well, we wanted to tell this story and there's this villain, but we already kind of established this whole timeline. Well, it's like, well, Barry can be wrong, and we can talk about a story where maybe Barry talks about it and he's important, and we talk about this villain or this moment, and he doesn't really remember it, and now it's a narrative, and now you can make that important. And that's what I appreciate about what DC has tried to do with these reboots and all these moments, which is making them tied to a narrative that is actually interesting to dive into instead of just being a editorial thing to make an easy way for readers to come in. It's that, but now it's also a narrative moment for these characters. For Barry, it's I think this happened, I think this is how this went. So I'm just detailing what I know. And it's fun to be like, hey, maybe he was wrong about this. Maybe that's where these little theories come in and we go, hey, he was kind of wrong about this. Can we chalk that up to just a Barry, misunderstanding? What about this? Or
Right.
hey, maybe he knows actually a lot about insert this because he was there. It's a fun way to speculate on little things that have like loose ties.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's interesting is when Mark Waid wrote the life story of the Flash, which is another book I may or may not brought up last time. That was a formative book for me as a kid too, because it was at the library, and it's written by Iris Allen, who is Barry Allen's wife, after the death of Barry Allen. But obviously Mark Waid is writing it, so it's an in-universe book about the legacy of this hero, and it hints at Cobalt Blue, and it came out the year they introduced Cobalt Blue. And so, if I'm not mistaken, Mark Waid hinted at Cobalt Blue, the long lost twin of Barry Allen, before he introduced him in the comic. So there can be little snippets of things in this miniseries that could hint to things down the line.
Yeah, and I think that that's always been something that Wade's done very strong. Like as we said, he's somebody who understands these things so well, and there's enough there where he's like, I know what I will tackle to make clear sense, and I also know what I won't be specific about, so I can allow that to be other people's playgrounds.
Yeah.
That still makes sense. You know what I mean? Because
Yeah.
he leaves a lot here where I'm like, I appreciate that you touched on it, but you did leave it to be a sandbox for other people to play around with, make assumptions, add new things too. And I like that. I think that's what a big timeline like DC's should be.
Yeah. So we talked about the Justice League fighting Darkseid, but then he disappears. Which I guess again I don't love and I don't hate, because I like the idea that the threat of Darkseid is coming, and you see hints at it through Intergang and G Gordon Godfrey, and like the fourth, like Apocalypse's presence on Earth as they like infiltrate like the gangs and the different things, and then you have an invasion of Earth. But like in this, they do work that through. But Victor Stone goes in suspended animation for further healing, and then it brings up that the Justice League weren't formalized as a team until a subsequent alien invasion from Appalax, which is the story found in, I think, 1990 something's JLA Year One, which has the starting lineup as Aquaman, Green Lantern, Flash, Black Canary, and Martian Manhunter fighting the Appalachian invasion.
Yeah, and I thought that was I liked the way that Wade is like sewing in all these Justice League elements, because like we were saying, there's a lot of things here where you can be like, this is where they officially started and became the named team, and these are just like them teaming up, going up against United Forces, all that kind of stuff. And I thought this was like a nice way to blend in. Okay, here's those new 52 elements, but here are those also JLA moments. That way, it's kind of like almost treating like the new 52 team ups in those little moments. There's almost like a nice unofficial start. So it almost feels like you could go back to those and be like, okay, I see where the little connections are here. I see where I can kind of place my own. I wouldn't even necessarily have to say headcanon, but just little moments of assumptions. And I think that that works really, really well here, especially because I do think that that was something I questioned them keeping. I wondered if they were going to just go the route of being like, after the new 52 Darkseid moment, they are the Justice League. Cyborg's there. I was worried that they would keep that. So it's nice to see them find a way to blend that in while being an unofficial team up. And then we get the actual, here's the name, here's the team, here's the brand, and the official actual moments.
This is when we officially started dating, and we deleted all our dating apps, and we went official on Facebook so that our families could see. You know?
Yeah, no longer just a situationship.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So I also don't blame Mark Waid for keeping what he wrote in continuity. I do not blame him. I think I haven't heard of anyone get upset about it, but like I'm sure there's somebody out there that's like, he's so selfish. And it's like, no, just he can have his cake and eat it too. Why would you as a writer write your own writing out of continuity unless you absolutely have to?
Yeah, you can't blame him, especially when he is somebody that is so tied to this timeline and this history. Like, if you're a writer, anyone like Mark Waid that comes in and writes and learns as much as they do about the DC world, I'm gonna give them the benefit of the doubt to be like, you can keep in whatever you want. If Grant Morrison was helping with this and was like, please leave this, and I'd be like, it makes sense. Why would you replace it, right? These are pretty important moments, one, and two, their stuff. I do not blame them in the slightest. If they start removing the stuff they added, it probably gets a lot more messy.
Exactly. Again, nobody wants to see also their favorite stories, not as a writer but as a reader, their favorite stories being written out of continuity. So like, we all have our favorite stuff, you know? They're not folding in Red Sun. They're not, you know, and that's fine. I want to rewind the clock a little bit to how this first appeared. The first couple pages are literally just Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman's origin stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I do want to make note that they finally re-cemented that Wonder Woman was born of clay. And that is a
Yeah.
very specific Wonder Woman origin element that was later retconned, right? Like, she was retconned to be the daughter of Zeus and Hippolyta in the New 52, I think, specifically. And although, again, I don't love it, but also, can I live with it? Yeah, but also, why? The idea that, like, she is born of clay and being um brought to life by the female uh goddesses. She has an aspect of each goddess. It's very Sleeping Beauty, like when the baby's born and the three fairies like do that. Hippolyta wanted a child, um, and she went to the beach and she molded a child out of clay, a baby, and the goddesses specifically, gifted that child with life. Um, as opposed to Hippolyta slept with Zeus and gave birth to Wonder Woman. I think the latter is the more powerful choice. Did you have any connection with this?
Yeah, so with that, it's an interesting one for me where I've never had a particularly strong opinion either way, but I do feel in a way where going the clay route is very much emphasizing the like out there nature of the comic booky world, and I do think that there is a lot of value to that and wanting to stick with that kind of origin, and I can appreciate why people would love that. And I don't even think I'm against that one. I actually think I might lean towards that one a little bit more, and the reason why is because even though I understand the Zeus origin being a bit more stronger and a bit more powerful, I think that the Zeus origin tied her a lot into the mythology of like Greek mythology a bit too much, to a point where I think that you lost a little bit of the more interesting elements of Wonder Woman that go outside of that are a little bit more zany, a little bit more out there and strange. Like, it's not to say I think the Zeus storyline makes it like watered down or bad. I just think it treats her a little bit too much like a demigod like character, a like a bit of like a Percy Jackson type, but just a little too much into that Greek mythology where I'm like, I like when it teeters that line and we're obviously a Greek related character, but there are these zany comic book elements that bleed into her life that are so strange and are like, really, that's how she came to be. I think maybe you can make the argument, does her being clay have to be the way that that goes down? I know that that's one of those ones where a lot of people tend to be like, that kind of throws me out of it a little bit. I don't know how much I believe into that as an origin story, and I can understand that. But I think I do.
As opposed to just the baby appearing.
I think that's the one I lean a little bit more. I think because the clay is one that I can appreciate, but it is absolutely the most zany option to me.
I don't
Yeah.
think it's as zany as you say, so I'm gonna push
Okay.
back a little bit, and I would
All right.
say, I mean, it's just as zany as Pinocchio. It's
True.
also just as zany as Greek mythology, where the sculptor sculpted his perfect woman, and the gods brought that to life. Right? I forget
Mhm.
I think it was Galatea or something. But the point being is that um, it fits in with Greek mythology just as a concept. I think there's a lot of symbolism with the clay that you don't get with the Zeus and Hippolyta union. And I think there's a lot of problems that arise. And I'm just coming. I don't let this stew. I know me personally. I'm trying to make sense of it, so I'm kind of coming up with it. Some people might be like, it doesn't matter, but I think that those people can choose to like stay on the outer edges of like the analysis, and that's okay. And just they're gonna be fine with Wonder Woman no matter what. That's cool.
Mhm.
Um, I think that you're right. Zeus being her father just makes her like Hercules. She's just
Yeah.
another thing, right? And then that also means that she has this like weird family of gods and goddesses, demigods, right? The idea that that's a thing, but then also the idea that like Hippolyta needed a man to to have a baby, and I know in real life, sure, but in this case, she is a woman from an island of women, and she longs for a child. Like, I think that's always in continuity. She longs for a child. She doesn't accidentally have a child. She longs for a child because there are no children there. And so she builds Wonder Woman out of Themyscira in a way. Through right? Like
Mhm.
through the clay. She is born of the land. And by being gifted, so in Percy Jackson's case, he has power over the water, but he doesn't have power over war because he's not Ares' kid,
Right.
right? He's Poseidon's kid. With Wonder Woman, she's gifted from the goddesses, which means if she has any warrior in her, it's from Athena, not Ares. She can talk to the beasts, which I think is a underrated skill of Wonder Woman. She can calm down a lion or whatever, right? Like she has that why am I Apollo's twin Artemis. So she has that from
Mhm.
Artemis, right? She has like Hecate and all that stuff. Like she has all the female goddesses. Um, read Wonder Woman. Have you read Wonder Woman Historia?
A little bit of it, yeah. I
So
gotta go
good.
through it. I
It is a
know,
work of
yeah.
art. That goes into it really, really like specifically. But the point being is that like I think for the purpose of Wonder Woman, all boxes are checked if she's born of the land, gifted by the goddesses, and without Zeus's involvement. And then I like
Yeah,
Zeus being Cassie Sandsmark's uh, father, because Cassie
me too.
Sandsmark, it's her father.
Yeah, and that's a good point too. I think the way I would probably rephrase how I feel about it is more like if we're looking at between the two options of her being Clay and her being Zeus's child, I think that if you're looking at through the which is the more zany and very comic booky feeling origin, it is that Clay one. And I think that it's in a way where it's less about how out there it is, but more about how unique that is and how much that really like ties into the character, as opposed to a more traditional Hercules type. They're the daughter of these gods. I think one fits so much more into a unique mold of a character
Yeah,
that I think makes for an interesting origin. So that's how I would look at it, I would say. Because I just think, like you said, that origin of Zeus and all that stuff, being born of a man and stuff like that, it's one of those things where it's like I wouldn't necessarily say it takes away from her, but it's something that you look at and go, it feels like he'd be way stronger if he wasn't here.
I think it's also funny that like you know how like the goddesses don't accept the demigods. They're always like, ugh, you half human like scum. I don't care if you're my half brother. You're still half human. I like the idea that like she's not even elite enough to be a demigod, but she's better than demigods, you know?
Yeah,
Like she's
yeah,
gifted straight from the gods, like power source wise. Doesn't matter if they're the seed or not. So um I thought that was a interesting, like, okay, they cemented that. But something that people are arguing about is Diana is the second Wonder Woman now. That Hippolyta
yeah.
went to man's world as Wonder Woman in World War II, and that is something that was in continuity around Grant Morrison's JLA run. Is that Hippolyta was the first Wonder Woman in World War II fighting with the Justice Society, and then she goes back to Themyscira, and then Diana goes back later. Some older stories have made it that it was Diana time traveling to the past, fighting with the JSA there. Sometimes there is no Wonder Woman in World War II. Sure. But in this, they state there are two heroes that are stated to be daughters of JSA. It's Black Canary and Wonder Woman. Both of them are daughters of their mothers who fought with the JSA. Do you have any
Yeah,
opinions about that?
that's it's an interesting one for me because at first I truly didn't know how to feel about it because it's one thing that I could see people disliking the choice, but I didn't have like a strong opinion either way. I think now I lean towards maybe not necessarily loving the choice, but accepting the choice is like a that makes sense to me from what we already have because you already have the muddiness of Wonder Woman in World War II. And if you want to get into all the stuff of is she just there during that time and all that, if you wanted to skip that and just have Hippolyta be that one, I think it adds for a nice legacy factor to Wonder Woman having a predated person there in the Wonder Woman mantle. And I do like that aspect, I think, a lot. It's not something that I think would be ideal. If you had to start all over again, I would have just not had a Wonder Woman in World War
I
II.
don't
I
think
just
Wonder
wouldn't
Woman
have had
needs to
one.
be in World War II.
She doesn't need to be at all, you know? But if you're trying to make sense of the muddiness that's there, I actually like it quite a bit. I think it's an interesting way to go to her. And I think it's an interesting dynamic for her to have with Hippolyta, like going forward and just stories in general between the two of them. And like I said, it adds a nice element where Wonder Woman has the legacy going forward of like, Cassie being a part of this family and Donna Troy. And then now, like, Trinity later in the future, like all that stuff. It's nice to at least now have like a predated, person within this mold that was in World War II and a part of the JSA. I think something is kind of interesting about that. And it kind of makes me want to go back and reread the stories where, whether or not it's specified, just Wonder Woman being in that setting and thinking of it entirely through the lens of Hippolyta's Wonder Woman. Because I think that that's a at least interesting way to frame how muddy of a situation that already was if you're not going to just remove her from World War II. So I lean towards actually liking it quite a bit as a choice.
I wonder if this was an editorial decision, because it doesn't make sense from a writing position, but it
Mm-hmm.
may make sense from an editorial position, stating that what they don't want is any like old issues of Justice Society that have Wonder Woman in it to not be considered true. Like they want it
Yeah.
still to be in continuity, whatever wiggling has to take place. I think that idea of like, oh, that did happen. Otherwise, they would have to say none of those happened.
Yeah, I think that might be a good point, honestly, especially because, like, I think with Wonder Woman, there's a lot of people who don't really actually even know that she was in a lot of those JSA
Yeah,
World War II comics. Like, there's so many people who already just kind of point blank don't know that.
yeah,
And so I think that at the very least, it's a nice, like, let's just say they're two separate ones. Let's just leave it at that. They're two separate people.
yeah,
I think that that works as like just like I said, like a palate cleansing. Like, leave it alone. That's another person. Let's just have it at that. She doesn't know. This is just her mother.
yeah. I. What do you think would be worse? Is them setting up that Hippolyta was the World War II Wonder Woman, or saying that another Amazon was Wonder Woman in World War II? Is it necessary that Hippolyta is that first Wonder Woman in World War II? Or that whatever character Linda Carter plays in the horrible movie that is WW84, like what I forget what her name was, but like
I know, yeah. I That's a really good question. I I don't think it needs to be Hippolyta. I don't think it needs to be her. I think there is significance to that, and I think it makes a nice family legacy aspect to Wonder Woman. But I think it could just be any Amazonian. I do think that, like, it doesn't have to be family tied. I think it truly could be anyone. I think there is an interesting avenue of going about it in a way where it is someone that even Diana didn't know. I think that that could be a really interesting way of going about it. But I would lean towards saying that I don't think it has to actually be Hippolyta. I think from a family connection, that's fun, but it doesn't need to be that.
I think it might have been cooler if it wasn't Hippolyta because you could
Yeah.
essentially write a whole story. I'm trying to think. I'm just writing it in my head right now. A story
Yeah.
about a imagine years before Diana, because Diana, like, you can't. They either put her as ambassador to Man's World, or they either said don't ever go to Man's World, and she does.
Yeah.
There's two. I don't know whether it expresses which origin is in this one, but the idea that like maybe the Amazons sent a ambassador to Man's World that got like stuck during World War II, and she was almost too naive and suffered by Man's hand to
Yeah.
the point where
That could be.
Themyscira is like, we're not sending anyone back. Let them die. We can
Yeah.
we couldn't even set them back. Like we tried to help in the biggest war, and you betrayed our ambassador. And let's just say this is a prequel miniseries, like a flashback miniseries, kind of like Captain America Truth, where you're showing the original Wonder Woman and then she's betrayed
Mhm.
because it pushes that symbolism of the distrust of Man's World. Maybe, I mean, that would have been a twist where she dies at the end.
Yeah, and that's a really good point because now I'm thinking in my head, like, yeah, maybe that would be a little bit more interesting. And at least it to me, it's like between two options of, do you want to make sense of what's already there, or do you want to open up a sandbox for someone else? And Wade chooses between those two things constantly with this series. Like, it's either, all right, here's the definitive thing here, or I'm going to allude to this. You guys, you assume what you want to assume here, and I'll let writers play with what they want to here.
Yeah.
So for him to have made the choice to make this Hippolyta, I'm sure he thought about it. But now the more that I think about it, the more I think there is such a fun avenue of having a mysterious Wonder Woman that we don't know about too much in World War II. And I
Yeah.
wonder if, even though Hippolyta makes sense, and I totally get that like timeline of things, maybe it would have just been way more interesting to just open up a sandbox there to play with a like beginning Wonder Woman there that we don't know too much about, that's not connected to Diana but is an Amazon. Like I think
Yeah.
that could have been really fascinating.
I mean, now I'm thinking about just more ideas, and I do want to move on. But the idea that like you could have told a story talking about four Amazons that were chosen to represent Themyscira Man's world, and we don't know, like it can go back and forth between that, like, and we don't know who won the battle or the championship to go to Man's world, and you find out through the back and forth of the story when they, especially when they die, like who it is or like whatever, and then what the other three are doing at that time, right? Like, and you can hint that like Hippolyta could be one of those choices. It could be a younger Hippolyta. It's not gonna be that much younger because they live forever, but like it could have been Hippolyta as one of the four, and then we just don't know like who it is.
Yeah, we should be pitching this to Mark Wade.
Oh
I'm
man.
like, this could actually be kind of great.
I mean, that also, keep in mind, this could also be Barry when he's writing it. He thinks it's Hippolyta.
Yeah, good point. Yeah, no, because who else would he think that it is? And she has been Wonder Woman again, like
Later, yeah,
after post Infinite Frontier,
yeah.
like she was Wonder Woman again. So of course he would assume, yeah, she was that original one. So you
He's
at least
he's fooled by the mystery of the story in a way.
yes, yeah. So you have like some room there to be like, he could be wrong. He totally could be wrong in this
Oh
case.
man.
Makes sense he'd feel the way he does.
Okay, all right, we got to move on, but yeah. So the first couple issues, I mean, or the first couple pages, kind of just tell us who Superman, Batman is. They don't do anything crazy, as far as I can tell. They introduce his villains. You're not meant to think they're in any particular order of appearance. They're just like Batman appears. He only has two friends, which is Jim Gordon and Alfred Pennyworth, and that will change. But moving on, they do make sure that we know that Arthur Curry is the son of a lighthouse keeper and a queen, which isn't always the case.
Mhm.
And then also, by the way, I don't know if you remember, there's still a World War II Aquaman that has been hinted at.
That's right.
There is still that
Hmm.
guy, but we haven't seen him in continuity yet. He was in hinted at the end of Flashpoint Beyond and in the pages of like the Golden Age kind of the new Golden Age comics and whatnot. The Stargirl and the Lost Children and those ones. So there is a World War II
Yeah,
Aquaman that they do not mention in this. I just think that's interesting. But
that is
um
interesting.
he keeps the old origin story, which is I think that he is just the son of a two Atlanteans. But
Right.
in
Yeah.
this, they're like, no, the Aquaman we know is the lighthouse keeper and the queen's son. Cool.
Mhm. Keep
Um,
it clean. Keep it simple.
yeah. So sorry.
Bless you. Bless you.
um, they bring up Mixospitalik, which they didn't rename or respell because his continuity has always had different spelling or whatever. But like they've
Mhm.
stuck to it. I just rewatched the Mixospitalik episode of the animated series, the Superman animated series. It's so funny, it's so good. It's
It's
so
just a great character to use, and
sparingly.
yes, sparingly. That was the next thing I was about to say. He is great when you use him rarely. If
Yeah.
you get too happy, like trigger happy with him, it gets annoying and it gets stale.
Same with
Keep him
Bizarro.
rare. Yes, I fully agree with that. Yes, they are both characters that I think become more rich with the less time you see them, and people don't realize how important that also is to Bizarro.
Yeah.
He because and then when people love him in storylines, they don't think about it, but it's like you didn't see him for a while. Then that's a big part of why you like it now. Because if it can get stale very fast, especially with someone like Bizarro with such a simple idea.
I also think that there's more than one Bizarro out there in DC continuity.
I think so. I remember hearing a few people talk about how messy that aspect is. I think there's a few.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyway, they do mention Bizarro here, but they just mentioned that he's like a duplicate, and that was it.
Mhm.
We don't know much more. Um, they do okay. So they do mention the Teen Titans that Batman's the first to get a sidekick, but then Wally West and Aqualad and Roy Harper, then they become sidekicks. Now, some people are a little upset that Donna Troy is a little later than them on a couple of different things, but I don't necessarily think it's necessary. But I don't know what happens in the first issue of the old Teen Titans comic. Like, I don't know who the starting
Yeah.
lineup is.
I think the starting lineup was like Dick Grayson, Wally West. It was Aqualad, Donna Troy,
Was Donna
Speedy.
Troy though a founding member in the original?
If it may not have been her. I could be a little bit incorrect here. I think I could be totally wrong, but she either was or came like a few issues later, like not many, but a few issues later.
Yeah.
So
So
that Wade could just be on point with that, if that's what he's getting at here. Oh, that's so frustrating. I can't remember which is the right one here.
I don't know. I'm trying to look up publication history of the Teen Titans. They first appear in Brave and the Bold 54 back in 1964, and they fought Mr. Twister. But they only they first appeared fighting Mr. Twister in Brave and the Bold 54, but then they adopted the name Teen Titans in issue 60, then joined by Donna Troy.
I was about to say maybe it was an unofficial team up first kind of
That's
deal.
what they were doing.
There you go.
Okay. So she wasn't part of the original team. It's 4 of them, if not 3. No, it's only 3.
Oh, okay.
In the original Brave and the Bold 54, they team up, but they're not Teen Titans yet.
Right.
Robin, Kid Flash, and Aqualad.
That's right. Okay.
Then they appear under the name Teen Titans in Brave and the Bold 60, joined by Donna Troy.
And then it was Speedy that was the later one then?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Okay, interesting. See, it's so weird thinking back because I always look at those first 5 guys. Well, obviously the 4 of them and Donna Troy as that core 5. But now the more I'm thinking about it, yeah, I guess Speedy didn't really join until a little bit later. I don't remember what that moment was. So Wade isn't going too far off with this at all. It still fits the grounds of like they were the first 5 of that group. They're not maybe the first all 5 together, but that was ultimately that like starting team.
Yeah. What's also interesting in this, and I don't know whether I hate to say that. Oh no, he's just not in the picture. I was like, they don't mention Green Arrow joining the Justice League, but they do. But he's just not in the splash page where they
talk
about everybody joining. But yeah, okay. So
interesting.
Yeah. So they do mention. We'll move on. They do mention with the Justice League that this is something I thought was interesting. Justice League would have reached out to the Justice Society if they and asked for their blessing with the team name, but they couldn't. Had we known how to find the long retired Justice Society, they would have asked for their blessing. That's what it says. So, which makes me think. First thing, they were retired, not stuck in Ragnarok. That was a 0-hour retcon back in the early 90s. Instead, they retired from hero duty, and nobody kind of knew how to find them. Though I would like to believe if Batman cared, he would just track them down, but he didn't.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, that's an interesting choice to me too, because obviously implies that they were hard to find, which again, maybe there's ways you can think to yourself, what made them hard to find? Did they really not want to be found? Is it, I don't know, is it any element of any of their powers being used to kind of keep them on the low? Anything like that. So that's an interesting point to me of really establishing that as they did not want to be found in a way. And then eventually the league came to know them, which interesting way of formatting that history.
They also do mention that the Flash's childhood idol was Jay. So Barry Allen grew up knowing who Jay Garrick was, at least the Flash, that is Jay Garrick. And which I always liked it as Barry Allen was a comic book fan. That was like part of Mark Waid's life story of the Flash book, is that he read Flash comics with Jay.
Yeah. And I like that a lot because I think that that's a fun way to, I think especially for people who are new readers, because I have like tons of friends who, especially in these past couple months, I've been getting into DC Comics. A lot of them who are just getting into this, even if they vaguely know who the JSA are, it always comes as a shock to them that Barry is not the first one. It becomes a shock to them, right?
Yeah.
Wally, maybe that's something they know a little bit about, and they're like, oh, it goes Barry, then Wally, and then maybe they know Impulse. But then when you bring up Jay, you're like, oh, sure. And then you're like, yeah, he was the first Flash. And it's like, so Barry's the second one. That becomes like kind of a shocker moment for them. So I like that we established that this is somebody that he actively is a big fan of, almost in like a comic booky sense, to then be like, becoming the Flash himself, right? Like, I think that's a nice connective tissue without having it to be like, necessarily a huge focus on him, being his own guy. And then eventually he finds out about who Jay is. And it's like, no, I like the idea of that being, not only maybe like a legacy, like mentor figure vibe, but also like a comic booky, I enjoy the history of these people sort of thing for him. And it ties back in because here he is talking about this history now.
The idea that he is a history buff or a cataloging sort of like meticulous kind of guy makes Barry more interesting. He is just a nerd. Stop
Yes.
making his personality Wally West's personality and just make him
Yes.
full on comic book collecting, categorizing, like nerd,
Yes, 100%. And that's the thing. It's like, I love Scott Snyder, but you just use Wally, man. If you really want to make Barry
But they
Wally, just
couldn't
use.
in the new 52, and that was such a big problem.
Yeah,
Um,
that's the thing.
so I mean, what's interesting also is that the Atom, even less people know that the Atom isn't the first Atom. There was an Atom of World War II that's not
Right.
related. Then there's also Green Lantern of World War II that's not related to Hal Jordan,
Hmm.
But now we also have Wonder Woman and Black Canary of World War II, and then the maybe forgotten Aquaman of World War II. What are they gonna do? Cyborg of World War II. There actually, did you know there's a robot? There's Robot Man uh, of World War II.
Okay, I knew Robot Man. I did not know of World War II.
There's
Okay,
Robot Man of Doom
interesting.
Patrol, but there's an old Robot Man from World War II. That's
Interesting.
always been.
Okay.
Yeah. Marvel also does that too. There's like there's some characters that we know now that had names or that were World War II characters also that fought like with Captain America.
And I think that's always a fun choice. I always find it very fascinating the difference between giving characters a World War II version or like a legacy to what their name is that is completely different versus that is entirely the same. Like
Yeah.
with Hippolyta and Diana, it is like basically same suit and concept, everything. With Adam, Mr. Terrific, I mean, these guys look completely different. You know what I mean? Or like even Blue Beetle going to, Jaime Reyes, eventually real different. You know what I mean? So I
Yeah.
like seeing the different choices of, okay, we're making this a legacy, but it's generally the same like concept, same hero vibes, same costumes, everything, or just complete 180 in terms of what the guy looks like, what his origins are, the lore. Like I like seeing those little differences and why they happen.
Say what you want about the Black Adam movie. I don't like the Black Adam movie. The
Me
JSA were
neither.
cool. I like the JSA in the movie. And also, Henry Winkler plays the World War II Adam.
Yeah, and I love that. I think that that's great, and it was an aspect of that movie that I was like, really, you're going to just establish that there's an older Adam? I thought that would be something that would maybe be. Maybe it's hurting the rock a little bit here, but maybe just wouldn't be something he cares about. You know what I mean? Just like let's not even include that, but it's like sure, let's just establish these predecessors. I love things like that.
I wish we just got a Justice Society movie. Like,
I wish that we could have seen those characters honestly transition to the DCU. I mean, I think that the way I'm a big Doctor Fate fan, a massive Doctor Fate fan, they handled him beautifully.
I
I
thought,
think that
yeah,
that was unbelievably well done. Unbelievably
Cyclone
well done.
also. I wasn't
Yeah,
expecting.
a weird choice, especially for such a small JSA team, for that to be one of the members. And I'm not mad at it at all because that's awesome. It's just like that's kind of a deep cut and that's a fun one. Like, you know what I mean? It's not what I would typically expect. Maybe you'd throw in like an Alan Scott or something like that or Jay Garrick. It's like, no, we're going to go for Cyclone, which, you know what? If it gives her fans and gives her a bit of spotlight, I am always for those little things.
Atom Smasher also. That was a
Yeah. Good, surprisingly fun, surprisingly entertaining, good costume. Like they all had solid costumes as
Hawkman
well. Like,
too. I liked Hawkman.
yeah, They all were done in a way that I thought was very like respectful to them feeling like an older team, but also generally like it felt like someone truly was just reading the JSA comics and wanted to do something fun with this. Like it didn't feel tacked on, you know, and that's one of the fears I had about that team in that movie.
Yeah.
But it was done so respectfully and done so fun that I really wish that bled into the DCU in some way.
The weak parts is the Black Adam parts.
Yeah, every Black Adam fight, if I'm being honest.
Yeah.
Yeah, anytime it was the JSA, I was just sitting there hoping this would just be about them and Doctor Fate and Hawkman.
Yeah.
I would way rather just watch them do stuff.
It was giving X-Men because the plane comes out of the mansion and whatever, but also
Yes.
it's such a tiny piece of that movie. I like the fact that they pack a bag to go on a mission. And it was like
Yes.
in my, like the X-Men, we've never seen them do that in the movies. Pack a bag for a mission. Because you're not sending me as a superhero unless I got snacks. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah. And that's the thing is it treated them like they are actually about to be gone for a while. They're gonna have to go do something. And I just like those little moments there of those tiny things of just like they're packing up, they're getting ready, you're washing off your injuries, whatever it may be. Those little moments just make it feel a lot richer to be like, oh, this is an actual person. They're not just going to and from. No, they're actually getting ready. This is the preparation. This is the little snacks they're gonna bring, the things that they're gonna use to kill time to get there. They're going there on the ship. Those elements, especially for the JSA, which is such a like comfy, old-fashioned team, I think that that's really fun.
I'm gonna be honest. I think us talking about this makes me want to rewatch Black Adam again. Not for the Black Adam parts, but there are good parts in that movie. And that's almost the shame of it is when you get someone so egocentric that makes the movie about themselves. It's a problem. Tell the story. Everybody wins if the story is good. If the story is good, the movie is good. We all win.
Yeah, and that's the thing is like clearly there's people that will. It never made sense to be egocentric about it either because Black Adam's a good character that you can dive into while he is an antagonist, while he is in the wrong. Like you can do all these things and have him be absolutely not a hero and have him be an incredible interesting and intriguing character where people come out and go, man, The Rock really killed that. Wow, he really did a great job at that. People are going to come out and be like, oh, he's a supervillain. We dislike The Rock, which seems to be his constant fear. It's just a strange like necessity of like, we've got to make me this some hero and the central focus point. And it's just like, I don't think any of this is necessary for a character who people will already grow attached to because they're a good character in the comics anyways. And you're clearly treating this with care from the comics for these other characters.
The problem is he doesn't want to be a supervillain, not because that it's bad necessarily, because he's fine playing anti-heroes. Supervillains will eventually lose. He can't contractually lose, and that's a problem. Black Adam needs to lose against Shazam. Like, and that's just the way it works.
Yeah, and that's why when they asked him to come on to Shazam, he said no. He literally told them no, which is insane to me. That's who your arch nemesis is. It's like making a Reverse Flash movie, and they're like, "Hey, have a cameo in the Flash." Like, no, it just makes the kind of no sense.
Imagine making a Bizarro movie without Superman.
Oh my god, it's just
that's what Sony does with Venom. That's what Sony does with Venom. Like, it's just like, okay, I guess. But
it's like a big elephant in the room that you're not addressing, but fine,
Same with Venom. Like, why is there a spider on your? Is there a spider on your thing?
It's like you can try all you want to make this just a goo powered guy, but he is pretty tied to Spider-Man, and I'm wondering where he is.
Yeah, yeah. They couldn't reach the JSA, but then the JSA appear. Then the whole society came out of retirement to help the League fight the crime champions. Is that a new name for the Injustice Society?
See, that's a great point because when I read this, I thought that has to be like a team that I'm not aware of, or like a team that was maybe like thrown together of like Legion characters or something like that, because I'm not familiar with them at all. I just kind of assumed that has to be like a deep cut team that I'm not familiar with a few rogues, but I'm not entirely
looks like they
sure.
are a team.
Okay.
First appearing in 1963's Justice League of America. Probably their name back when they teamed they teamed up with the JSA originally.
Okay.
Um,
Yeah.
it's just weird that they're not the Injustice Society, because I would have thought that that was, like the JSA's bad guys is the Injustice
Yeah.
Society, but like, okay. But yes, the lineup of the crime champions is Kronos, Dr. Alchemy, Felix Faust, Icicle, and Wizard.
Yeah, which is a fun lineup, by the way. But I wonder if also this is another situation of like they're coming out of retirement, and this is almost like the remnants of the Injustice Society because it seems like to be a smaller team, right? I wonder if, in a way, it's supposed to be like an unofficial remnants of the Injustice Society in a way that it's like, all right, they're trying to come back and be a new team that's coming back out. But of course, obviously, they lose in this case. So it's like, all right, yeah, a bigger team with more villains like this was the Injustice Society, but this is those remnants coming together. At least that's the way I tried to put it together in my head. It's sort of
Yeah.
like an unofficial, we're trying to come back kind of way.
Yeah, because I mean, I'm looking at the wiki for the Injustice Society, and it is also led by the Wizard. Um,
Okay,
but it has Vandal Savage, Per Degaton, the Thinker, the
right.
Gambler, and Brainwave. But then the second Injustice Society includes members of the crime champions, specifically Icicle and Fiddler. So
Okay.
so I don't know. So anyway, I guess this is crime champions for you. Though I think
Yeah, it feels like it's just remnants. At least that's the way I look at it, of just like, here's who's left, here's who's trying to make a comeback. That way when they fail, you can have anybody else going forward be, that was the crime champions. We're gonna bring back the real Injustice Society. You know what I mean? Just
yeah.
like who's left, who can try to fight back.
Also, what's interesting is those are all. Those are a mix. I think Kronos is not a Justice Society villain. I think Kronos is Justice League villain, and then Doctor Alchemy
I think
is
he's Justice League, yeah.
and Doctor
Well,
Alchemy is a Barry Allen Flash villain.
yeah,
But
yeah.
Wizard,
Like Icicle,
Icicle,
Fiddler, and Wizard, they are Injustice Society.
yeah,
But yeah, you're right. Alchemy is a very specific, like Barry Allen Flash villain.
yeah. So I think maybe this just kind of spins off of like Barry meeting Jay, and then his
Mm-hmm.
villains teaming up. They're both their villains teaming up. I don't know. Anyway, it was kind of weird.
Yes,
It's fine.
interesting.
Not a big deal. The page after that, we do get the fact that Supergirl was the second survivor. She was rocketed and then caught in a time warp. So that's what it is. Um, okay, fine, I guess.
Yeah, that works for
Whatever.
me.
You
Time
know,
warp.
time warp. I mean, there's not much difference between a time warp and a black hole or getting stuck in the Phantom Zone and come back later. Like,
Yeah,
it
just
is what it
kind of
is.
general cosmic thing. It's like, all right, I can work with that.
Did you know, and I just found this out, that in the Supergirl or Superman animated series, that Supergirl is not his cousin?
Really?
This whole time, my whole life, ever since that show came out, I thought she is not even Kara Zor-El.
What? Who is she in
So
it?
back then, DC Comics, not the cartoon, but DC Comics had a bunch of mandates. One of which is that Superman is the last son of Krypton. With that, they extrapolate that he's the last survivor of Krypton. So anyone that was pre-crisis that was also a survivor of Krypton had to be rechanged, which means back then Zod was not a Kryptonian. They did the Pokolistan Zod, which was the dictator of Pokolistan. He has like this armor and this helmet and whatever. So they introduced that. The Supergirl from the comics at that time was this protoplasmic being that like is part angel and there's like fire, this whole thing. That's why
Yeah.
Connor Kent is not, back then, he was not related to Superman by blood. He was essentially a hyper evolved human made from the genetic material of the Newsboy Legion. It was just a thing. He was not Lex Luthor or Clark's related to them. Lex Luthor funded it, but that's why the tactile telekinesis is technically almost like an evolved human power.
So
Meant
interesting.
to
So then,
mimic Superman's powers.
So then in the show, is she even given a name? Like, do we get to know? That's so
Yeah,
interesting.
in the show, I mean, she appears a lot in the show, and for all intents and purposes, he calls her cousin, whatever. But he says Kara, Kara, Kara. He always says Kara. Um,
Yeah.
but you find out. So basically, the backstory of Supergirl in the cartoon is that there was a satellite world called Argo City, and they were like another planet. Like Krypton colonized this planet in the solar system. So when the star exploded, their world became frozen, and they had to like go into suspended animation. But out of four people who were left, which is her mom and then three other people, she was the only tube that stayed intact. So technically, she's Kara Inze. That's her last name, Kara Inze. But then they don't bring up they don't ever bring up her last name other than her mom's last name is Inze. That's all we. So
Interesting. That
yeah,
is such a weird fun fact. Yeah, I mean that's like the whole time I just completely assumed that they were cousins and that this was Car. That's so weird.
it's so weird. And then she lives with the Kents on the farm, and then they're cousins there. But like technically, and it's not even that they're cousins and that she was cousins that lived on another world. They're not
Yeah,
genetically related, which was
that's
okay.
that's so straight. Yeah,
Yeah,
interesting. That's such a weird fun fact. I mean, I guess that makes sense, like you said, with the fact that it has to be a sole survivor of Krypton, but just weird thing to go back and look at. The whole time you would have just generally assumed they were cousins.
back then the comics couldn't even have Crypto be from Krypton.
Well, that is so that's so strange. I don't understand. I mean, I guess it makes sense, but what a weird era.
Yeah, there were. I mean, there was that. So anyway, we're getting some of this. So that's why it was a big deal in the 2000s when in Superman Batman, the second volume that they introduced Kara Zor-El and Darkseid comes to collect her, and that whole storyline, that was the first time
Mm.
we got Kara Zor-El since Crisis on Infinite Earths. By the way, which ties in with the final page of this, but we'll get to that. Anyway, little comic lore for you. So according to this book, Kara arrives years later. Um, Fine, but it
Yeah,
also she does not join the Teen Titans.
yeah. That one's interesting, and honestly, one that I'm fine with.
I'm fine with
I'm
it.
okay. I'm fine with that completely. That's one that I actually prefer being more isolated from that. I don't think that every teen hero needs to be like affiliated. So I actually am completely fine with that one.
Yeah. Um. So it does mention on this page after circumstances through Robin, Kid Flash, Speedy, and Aqualad together to defend a small town. That part's a retcon, but so because technically it's just three of them, not four of them, right?
Right, right. Yeah.
Um,
Good point.
they elected to remain a team along with later members, and they list a bunch of members. Wonder Girl is the last member they mention, but it does not mean that she's the last to join the team. This is a list of members that are later than the core four.
Mhm.
I think that kind of sucks. I think that Wonder Girl should be part of the like core five starters, but
She should be, and especially if we're going back and trying to retcon this a little bit, it doesn't make much sense to me for her to be isolated from that in any kind of way, especially with her importance to Diana. It fit the same importance that the rest of the other four had to their mentors. It just kind of feels weird to isolate her more. I don't, it just doesn't really, it doesn't fit to me. Like, even though you can try to make that what the timeline is, the entire time I look at her as an integral person to their relationship and friendship of all the five of them. Like, if I'm ever thinking of these characters looking back at their history, I'm thinking of them all looking back at it together as the big five. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
I'm never looking at that as here's the four and then Wonder Girl later.
yeah. I don't know. There must be a story reason or an editorial reason. Again, that's the
Yeah,
two things that Mark Wade has to have on his shoulders is, he's writing for story and he's also writing for editorial, right?
right. Could be a good reason. We've got no clue,
Who
but
knows?
yeah.
One day maybe I'll ask him.
Yeah.
I've met him once, or maybe I've met him twice. I forget if I met him once for sure. Um, interesting retcon is that Mal Duncan joins the team as Guardian.
Right.
Because I believe originally he joins the team as the trumpeter guy, Harold, I think.
Yeah, something like that. I like this retcon. I think that it was always more interesting for him to be Guardian. I'm totally fine with that. I think that is a completely fine uh, correction here. I think he was always kind of a fun second Guardian, so I like just kind of simplifying it. It's the kind of thing where it's like I get if people like the whole thing with the Tripody Herald thing, but like I'm fine with this. He's always been way more interesting to me as a character as Guardian, so I think that that's just like a nice, clean, like let's not make it complicated kind of deal.
Yeah. Um. I'm trying to see what. Oh no! I mean, in pre-crisis, he joins the team, or his first nick or his first code name is Guardian.
Oh, okay. All right. So then he was always okay.
In the
I think it.
pre-crisis, post-crisis, he builds Gabriel's horn and becomes something.
Oh, so it was post crisis. Okay.
Post-crisis takes away the Guardian origin story.
Yeah. I think it should have always just been Guardian. I think it's just much more clean that way, and I think that's always just been the most interesting aspect of him.
Yeah.
I like that role for him. I like that alias. It's just cleaner.
Yeah. You know what's crazy? I just learned a little piece of comic history too. In his first appearance with the Teen Titans, he kisses Lilith goodbye. Lilith being Omen.
Yeah.
And it's considered one of the first, or considered to be the first interracial kiss in comic book history.
Really?
Yeah.
That's
And
a interesting.
editorial got upset.
Wow, really? It's interesting to me to think that that was the first one. That those two more kind of obscure characters, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's so interesting.
You know what the first live action interracial kiss on TV was?
I don't think so.
Star Trek. It was Captain Kirk and Uhura.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
That's so interesting. Interesting. Looking at that and then thinking comics, it's two characters that you'd have to really explain to somebody. You know what I mean? That's really interesting. I
Yeah,
had no
nobody
idea.
knows Lilith and Mal Duncan. Like,
No, not at all. No, like not even close.
who would you
Even when
have
I showed,
thought? I'm trying to
I
think.
God, I'm trying to think of like an interracial
I
couple
think
that's more like B
Cyborg. I think there was
tier.
this blonde girl that like was friends with Cyborg for a little bit. Like she looked up like there was like kids. I'm forgetting her name, but there was like kids at the park playing ball, and Cyborg is part robot and he feels bad, but he wants to play ball, right? Like and like
Yeah.
work with these kids, and then she's like the 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 teacher or something like that. And I would have just assumed it would have been something like that.
Something like that, or like some early girlfriend of John Stewart's, I would have thought, or something like that. You know what I mean? It's just like even now, like I have friends that are going back and reading like Titans during Rebirth, and they're like, "Who is Lilith?" And I'm like, yeah, good point. Yeah, they're like, "Who is the Omen?" I have no idea who this is.
She's just DC's Jean Grey.
Yeah, exactly. Cool character. You know, I mean, when you get to know her, she's a cool character for sure. I actually wish she had more spotlight, but she is absolutely not well known.
Yeah, no. Um, what just wondering, we don't even have to talk about it much. What is that eye in the background of that issue? Like that right behind the Teen Titans, there's a floating eye, and I can't figure out what that eye is from the context of the page.
Yeah, that's one I've been not able to really figure out. I've been kind of just throwing guesses at the wall. At first, the first thing that came to mind was like something to do with like brother eye, just because that's the most general assumption I can make. But I'm
Uh-huh.
like, I don't think we were really tackling that by this point
No.
by any means. So I'm like, no, it can't be that. So I truly don't really know. I wondered if it was some kind of meta thing here. I don't really.
Is that
That was
Barry's
the
eye? Like as he
something like
watches
that.
history
I've yeah,
unfold?
something like that I have got to assume to be the case here, like him looking at it all,
Yeah.
because I truly don't know if it has something to actually do with this page and the Titans. Like, I don't really, I can't really think back to what that would be.
Yeah. I don't know. It is what it
Yeah,
is.
that's gonna be one I have to go back and see if anyone's got any clues on, because I saw someone on Twitter asking the same thing, being like, "What is that?" and no one had a clue.
No, yeah.
Yeah.
Um the next couple pages deal with every specific kind of hero that's popping up. not very many have any retcons worth talking about. It does talk about the Supermen project and how that's driving certain heroes' creations. Not every hero's creations, but some, right? Um,
Yeah.
and they do mention that like Niles Calder is involved, and he engineers unfortunate accidents, which sometimes is in continuity and sometimes not. But the idea that he is the one who caused the accidents of the Doom Patrol to test them and experiment on them, I like that. That's
Yeah.
makes them
I
sinister, you know?
Yeah, and I will say, because I am a big fan of both these characters, tying both Captain Atom and Firestorm into this Superman project, and them being them and Element Woman being these people that like were the only ones that kind of survived the experiments and became heroes. I do like that. I like that. I don't think that it like messes with anything in a retcon way that feels like messy. It actually kind of cleans things up, and you can still like apply a lot of their history to what has happened. Like it doesn't hurt anything. And I actually think it gives them some fun, meaningful importance to their creations as heroes.
Yeah. I mean, out of the Superman project, it tells us that Dr. Will Magnus created the Metal Men. Sure. And then Niles Calder, I don't know if he's involved in the Superman project, but he created the Doom Patrol. We see some other heroes pop up here and there. Um, they mention the crime syndicate and blah blah blah. But yes, as far as the Supermen project is concerned, they bring up three heroes that worked out to be heroes, which is Captain Atom, Firestorm, and the Element Woman. And then they mention three villains that came out of the Supermen project that were villains. But I don't know the extent of how they were even involved in the Supermen project. Killer Frost, Man Bat, and Lady Clayface.
Yeah, these were really interesting choices to me because Captain Atom and Firestorm, that makes sense. I totally get the appeal there. I totally get like the line there.
Yeah.
Like they're like very much like sort of like nuclear, quantum powered
Yeah.
superheroes. I get that. Element Woman, that can make enough sense to me if you didn't want to throw Metamorpho in there. Totally makes sense. I get that, right? Then
And they
you get to
mentioned
like
Metamorpho earlier, though.
yes,
Yeah.
exactly. So that makes sense to me. But then it's like two characters that are Batman villains that are a little bit weirder, like Man Bat and then Lady Clayface, and then Killer Frost is the only one that makes a little bit more sense to me just because of the ties to Firestorm. But even
Yeah.
then, I'm like, the other two really like. I wonder, like, what is the significance of them? Just even generally, the three. I really don't know how they came to be those three characters because they're way less like I don't know what would be the word here. Like they feel way less like characters that have been experimented on to be like superpowered soldiers.
Yeah.
Whereas I feel like Firestorm and Captain Atom feel like that. Even Element Woman in a way kind of feels like that. The other three don't. They feel like kind of just like monsters, right? And maybe that's the point. I don't know, but they're the three characters for each of these different like heroes and villains feel very different from each other.
Yeah, maybe the idea is that like Captain Atom and Firestorm is them trying to harness nuclear energy for the government, right? Element
Mhm.
Woman, again, that's almost nuclear in a way. Like it's the building
Yeah,
blocks of matter, right? Like Element
right.
Woman, sure. And then Killer Frost being related to Firestorm, those are more the fringe ideas. I'm sure there are scientists under the Superman project that are like, yeah, but what if one of us can turn into glue? And it's like, well, we don't want to fund that. And then Kirk Langstrom is like, just give me a couple mil. I'll start splicing animals together and see what happens. And like Man
Right.
Bat pops up. Like I'm sure those are fringe ideas of what could you give the government. uh, you know, I could make someone into a crocodile, and it's like, all right, I'll give you a little bit of money, but don't do anything with that glue idea you had earlier. You know?
Yeah, yeah. It's a really interesting choice too because like first of all, two of these are Batman villains, right? And they're Batman villains that are like pretty, I would say, like decently tied to the mythos of Batman, with obviously Man Bat, with everything to do with like his creation, and then Lady Clayface being I forget which number of the Clayfaces, but in a line of other
Three. I think
characters.
I think she's number three because
She's three. Okay. Yeah,
Basil
right? Like,
Basil Carlo, Matt Hagen. She might be four. So yeah, she's
yeah,
four. Sandra
she's four.
Fuller is four. So I know Basil Carlo and Matt Hagen are the first two, and then there's the one who has like the jar. He has like He has like
Yes.
a jar over his head. I think that's number 3.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I was like, I know he was either 3 or 4, but interesting because I think these are two characters that are very tied to like Batman mythos, and it doesn't ruin anything by any means, but it adds a layer that I'm like, I feel like you got to talk about that at some point. You don't really need to, but it's like a that's a very interesting element to add to their existence is that they were part of a Superman project. That's a very interesting and very specific characters to add to this mix.
So it's very interesting. Like these are deep cuts that I didn't know. So I consider myself one of the I would say I'm one of the preeminent DC lore guys. I think, just by the sake of having read it for a long time. There's like deep cuts. I didn't know there's a team called Strike Force Cobra, and they were from the pages of
Oh,
the Outsiders. And Strike Force Cobra had 2 of these people on the team. They were a villain
really?
team led by Lady Eve, formerly Cobra. So they're kind of a villain team,
Interesting.
and it was Element Woman is on the team, and Lady Clayface is on the team.
Really?
So
Okay.
I'm sure this is like a Hydra situation where the government funded the project and Hydra stole it, kind of thing. So Cobra being like Hydra, right?
Yeah. Very interesting. Okay, that's really, I'm gonna have to really look into that because that's a very interesting deep cut to tie, especially to Captain Atom and Firestorm and a little bit of what Killer Frost is, and she is connected to Firestorm. I think I would say out of everything in here, this Superman project and particularly these 6 characters is one of the most interesting like retcons of like, what are you doing here? That's cool. This is an interesting area to like play around with. I'm very curious to see more of this.
Especially like a character like Lady Clayface, who cares?
Yeah. I'm like, that's such a niche. It's like, sure. I mean, like, she gets used a few times. I think she's been kind of like a random rogue that's helped out Catwoman recently or something like that. Like, she's a very like thrown to the side character.
Yeah,
Interesting to make her integral, but I'm here for it. I'm very curious.
yeah. Um, Yeah, I'm interested to see kind of what I think Mark Waid is just setting up things, and I'm sure other people had to chime in, being like, "Hey, I have this story that I'm gonna do with Lady Clayface coming out in the next like year. Can you throw something in the Superman project, right?"
Yeah.
So, um, we, weirdly enough, we do get a portion of the page talking about Dial H for Hero, which is Robbie Reed. Do you know Dial H for Hero?
Little bit vaguely. I know a vague amount of it. I know the name.
So Robbie Reed finds this magical, like almost rotary phone where you dial the number, so you dial HERO in the rotary phone, and he turns into a different hero every time. It's Ben 10. It's
Yeah.
kind of like Ben 10 in a way, but it's random. So he turns into a random hero with a random power set, and it was one of those things. I don't know too much about the original run, but there was a later run that is really cool. It's a miniseries, and basically a serial killer gets the dial, and he starts killing people with different powers, like with different
Oh,
power
okay.
sets, and it's a sequel to Robbie Reed, but he's like older now, um, and so like it's the art is really good. There's a woman who is cut into like a grid of cubes through the serial killer's
Interesting.
powers. It's
That's
weird.
really interesting.
Yeah, but
Yeah, I have
it's a
to
really
check
cool
that
art.
out.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, I have always heard the name, but I didn't know much about it. I think I had generally heard people speak about it as like a Ben 10 type deal.
Yeah.
Interesting to hear them talk about that.
Yeah, like why is that important? Why is Dial H for Hero important to put on the DC history timeline?
The only thing I can assume is this something because especially with the past couple years of like Infinite Frontier and Rebirth, there have been these little moments where we see older characters kind of get a bit more shine or like they get a bit more spotlight than they. I wonder if this is one of those cases, or maybe even it's just like a little side character for something or a little mission. Maybe they're gonna be referenced in some kind of way going forward. Maybe we see a little bit of something.
Yeah.
That's what I assume to be the case.
It's kind of like how Mark Waid, he's been including the rando character named Dr. Occult in the Justice
Yeah,
League comics. And then he included him in the timeline on the DC Universe stuff, like in the previous issue. So I was like,
Yeah.
okay, I get it, but
Yeah.
um, they do bring up the international terrorist group Cobra in this
Yes.
issue. So I mean, they also bring up Warlord, and who cares about Warlord? But whatever,
Yeah.
you know.
I do
Um,
love the Cobra mention now.
yeah. So it's like, is that all related then? Right? Like maybe they're
It's
building
gotta
up
be.
a story of Cobra versus the government.
Which I would love. I think that'd be a really, really fun time. I mean, we've got obviously like government meddling. I mean, like DC out of nowhere has had a bit more focus on Captain Atom again. Like not a big focus, but enough to like make me go, okay. So I wonder if we're getting towards a little bit of that, versus the government type deal going on here,
Right.
which I would be very interested in as a Captain Atom fan.
Um, they do mention when the Titans get back together, a revived and revitalized Cyborg. So
Yes.
so now I'm assuming he's
This
around the same age as Dick Grayson and all those other guys.
Yeah, this was an interesting piece to me that I think works because obviously they establish, as we talked about, Cyborg being a part of that original team, which is like, okay, let's see how you end that because obviously he has to get to the Teen Titans. Now, it was either you start with the Teen Titans and make your way to the Justice League or vice versa. And we went vice versa. So I think it's interesting because obviously, one, how old is he supposed to be? And two, just in general, very interesting choice to have this be his second stop for a team and for this to be that long of a hiatus for him, which is just really, I don't know generally how I feel altogether about it, but it's very interesting of a choice to have you start off with the Justice League and come back as somebody who was injured from that battle years later or whatever, and now you're part of the Teen Titans. It's like, okay, interesting way to flip how his progress has happened. I don't know how I fully feel about it yet, but it's very much a bold choice for his origin.
It makes me wonder. It has to be like he was old enough to be an adult to fight with the Justice League,
Mm-hmm.
but young enough to still be a teen to be on the Teen Titans.
So like real young, like that's the thing of like pretty young enough for him to be like late 20s by like the time he's with Teen Titans, you would hope.
Well,
I
but he's in suspended animation.
Yeah, that's the thing.
And also, they have
Yeah,
the new Teen Titans pop up. It seems after the Justice League satellite um, era
right.
or during that time. So it's like, okay, I mean, we're dealing with a like Dick who is uh he's graduated high school at this point. He's probably like 21 at this point. So Cyborg being around that, like, okay.
Yeah, I can get with that. And I think there's something fun about the fact that like, especially the way that they really phrase this is like a leveled up team, like a team with real deal hitters like Starfire, like Raven, right? Like Beast Boy. And it's like, okay, if you're phrasing it that way and you want it to feel as though this is the new Teen Titans that is truly like, oh, they've upgraded. I get it, right? Because now you're formatting Cyborg in a way where this is an OG, almost forgotten about Justice League member, and a guy that isn't really has to be that tied to the Justice League because it was one mission where they weren't even official. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? It's just a guy that did a big thing and was a part of a big moment, but isn't like a core Justice League character. He's still almost in a way like has his identity tied to the Teen Titans first still,
Yeah.
which I do think is done pretty well by Wade here, I will say.
Yeah. Also, what was I thinking? Oh, there maybe he was in suspended animation because the idea that like Darkseid invades Earth first, then like leaves, and we don't know that Inner Gang is being funded by the Fourth World, right? Like we don't know all that. I feel like if Cyborg was going around fighting crime, his mother box, he would have had like adventures or whatever in that time period and uncovered things or whatever, right? Like I feel like there would have been a
Yeah.
crossover where maybe just take him off the board, you put him in suspended animation for story purposes, and you bring him back later. Okay,
Yeah.
it is what it
And
is.
it's like, yeah. And it's like, I think that it's a weird way to, like I said, it's a weird way to go about it because it really does feel like the simplistic option is he's part of the Teen Titans and then eventually joins the Justice League as one of these extended roster members. But like, if this is the way you're gonna do it, it is an interesting way to frame Cyborg's history. It really, really is. It just truly is a bold one because I am sure there are plenty of Cyborg fans that are like, this really flips things on its head then because now he was first a Justice League guy and later became Teen Titans, but it's like he was part of an unofficial team, so it's not even like he has to have these deep ties to being a Justice Leaguer. It's just that he worked with those heroes, got hurt, was in stasis, and then eventually became a Teen Titans member. So he's just this bit of a seasoned member of the team that knows so much. And it's like, all right, interesting way to flip this. A very interesting one at that.
I mean, he was what, frozen for maybe 8 years?
Yeah. So
It's
like,
kind of okay. Which means also he's also in a way a man stuck out of time by 8 years
yeah.
at least, right? Like he played ball with LeBron when LeBron was first coming up, and then he stopped, and now he's like with Steph Curry, and like
And it's like, all right, fine,
what?
it's yeah, it's an interesting way to go about it because it just, I will say the one thing here is I would love to see a great Cyborg writer get to do the next thing with him if this is now what his history is, because I'm not against it, but I want to see someone with real care take care of this to make it feel right and make sense and feel coherent. You know what I mean? It's like, all right, bold choice, but you better back that up with a real good writer that can really make this feel smooth, that can really tell another Cyborg story where we're like, all right, this is what the world is and this is what his history is. How do we talk about this? How do we frame this for his life? You know what I mean? Because I think it's something you can easily make feel wonky. You know what I mean? I think it makes sense, but it's something you can very easily, with a writer that doesn't love him, feel very awkward or like he's too much of like a real Justice League. Or, yeah, there's ways for it to go south.
Yeah. Um. They bring up Batman's Outsiders, which I'm a big fan of the Outsiders just from a team.
Yes.
Like I love teams, and if they're serving different purposes, cool. Like
Yeah.
I'm cool with
They're
that.
they've always been a fun team. I've always felt that Halo was a very underrated character.
Mm. Yeah, Halo. Yeah, comic Halo to me, like I have no opinion on. But Young Justice Halo, they kept killing
Yeah.
her and killing.
Yeah, they didn't do bad. They didn't do like a too crazy of a departure. I did like the race swap though. I thought
Yeah,
that was one of those moments where I was like, that actually works really quite well. I like that a lot. I hope that that is something that goes on for modern depictions of her. I like that a lot.
but it doesn't look like that's the case. So
No.
it is what it is. Uh, then we bring in Justice League Detroit, moving to Detroit. Um,
Yes.
uh, and they update Vibe's costume. And then they bring up Infinity Inc., which I thought was more of a wild choice. Um,
Yeah. I This was an interesting one just because it is one of those times where it's like this unofficial like second JSA team or whatever. I mean, there were so many elements of this too where it's like it's tiny things, but it's enough that I know that they think about it. Where it's like, all right, some of the characters looked a little bit different, like what used to be like what Adam Smasher's suit was, and when he was what was it,
Nuclon.
Nuclon, right? Yeah, things like that. Like it's just those things where it's like, all right, that's an area you want to hit. I'm not mad at it at all. I think that's actually I've been interested to see how that could be, uh, put into the DC history in a way that feels smooth, and I think that the way they explained it, it actually kind of fits well with how they've addressed the JLA and the Justice Society and everything like that. I kind of like that inclusion.
Yeah, it is kind of my big problem as we close this up is now after Infinity Inc. They needed to introduce Infinity Inc. so that we can get to Crisis on Infinite Earths. I I'm gonna be honest. I don't know. Work with me here, okay? This ends with Crisis on Infinite Earths. In this new history of the DC universe, which is like making DC continuity by bringing in bits and pieces and merging it. How does that work with the multiverse and then the collapsing of the multiverse with Crisis on Infinite Earths? I would think that the exact things have happened all this time, the way publication and everything has had it. And then we've had all these multiverses, and it was a mess. Then we had Crisis on Infinite Earths, and then now the timelines are merged after Crisis on Infinite Earths. If time makes sense, I know it's like time in the multiverse is all weird. How does the new history of the DC universe make sense leading into Crisis on Infinite Earths versus after it? Like, all the universes should be merged after it to make this continuity, not merge it first into Crisis on Infinite Earths to get what after?
Yeah, it's really interesting because I'm like, so does that mean everything about this is pre-crisis definitive? Like, does that mean everything that they're going to explain about Crisis on Infinite Earths and after that, like, are things going to change again? I
I
wonder.
don't think so. I think maybe, as I'm thinking about it, like in the 90s, they mentioned that like Barry died in the crisis, but they don't remember exactly what it was, other than it was a big battle and all the bits and pieces, but they don't know the full scope because the multiverse ceased to exist after Crisis on Infinite Earths.
Mhm.
So maybe this is just, oh, crisis happens and then we're moving on. Like,
Yeah, yeah. That's kind of what I think they're gonna do with it, where it's like, all right, crisis happens, and especially through the lens of Barry talking about it. I wonder how that will be used for this next issue, because especially for something that was so closely tied to him specifically dying, I I really do. I really don't know how they're going to handle this next issue. And I will say, on top of that, we're at issue 2 of 4, right? And this is we've only hit Christ on Infinite Earth. I wonder how quickly we're going to move through these next sections of Infinite Crisis, of everything after that. Like, there are a decent bit, like, it's not a ton of reboots, but it's enough of chunks of information to know that I'm like, are we going to start speed running through pieces of this? Or are we going to get to like enough time to talk about like rebirth and some of these other eras? I wonder how that time balance is going to happen for these next 2 issues.
I wonder how they're going to bring in, like, for example, with this idea that like these events happen. This is like a merged timeline, so like, but the events still happen. Do the events of Flashpoint still happen? You know what I mean? Like, how could they? If
Yeah,
Flashpoint creates a new universe, how can you work that into this new universe? Like, it just can't
yeah.
make sense. So, can we just cut it out? I don't know.
It's the thing where it's like, the only way I can see it is you frame it through the lens of Barry trying to explain that confusing stuff to the audience. Like, hey, I know this next bit's going to get real confusing for you here. Like, I truly don't know how, beyond just getting real meta with it. Like, hey, this next part's going to get real messy here. Even we don't understand it fully, but this, and that. Like, that's the only way I can see framing it, beyond just like, wait, but if we're talking about crisis, and this is now what the timeline is, it's like what it's very messy. It's what I'm very very curious to see how this is addressed.
Here's a question for you. Where do you think issue 3 ends?
Oh,
I would say, no.
I think I
It either has to end at Flashpoint and the new 52, but they're not going to work into the continuity that the continuity got rebooted again in the, you know what I mean? How
yeah,
do you continuity that the continuity got rebooted again in the, you know what I mean? How
yeah.
do you new 52 you can't exist on its own as a reboot, right?
Yeah. I think I lean towards them ending at rebirth. And I think why is because I think that they're going to try to tackle all of these confusing reboots together. Like, I think that's going to be the core of like, and then the world changed, and then this changed, and then this changed, and then this changed. And then here's where we are with the start of rebirth, moving through like, infinite frontier and all of those things up to now. It just feels like the one way to be like, let's just tackle these all in one issue here. Because if you do get to like Flashpoint, are you saving the rest of everything post then with Rebirth and all this other stuff for the last issue? How much are we getting to beyond that?
It has to be. It depends on whether you're including Flashpoint or not. So I think that issue 3 either ends with Final Crisis but it could also like it takes all of the 90s into the two like it'll take 20 years of right like 90s into 2000s. Final Crisis like 2008 or something.
Yeah.
Flashpoint's 2010, right? So like maybe they do it either up to Final Crisis, up to Flashpoint, or you're right, up to Rebirth, so that issue 4 is here are the recent events that have happened and some clues to some future events. Maybe that's what
Yeah.
issue 4 is.
Yeah, and that's the best way I can think of what it'll be, because I'm like, man, if you don't end off at Rebirth, you got a lot to talk about. And maybe they'll find a great way to balance it, I'm sure. But that's the big one to me, is wondering just how these next big chunks of time are going to be balanced between two issues.
Yeah. Also, there's a lot that happened in the 90s, like story
Yeah.
wise. We're talking Death
Yeah.
of Superman. We're talking Hal Jordan going evil. We're
Yeah.
talking all the Batman lore, like everything in the 90s. Like, I
Yeah.
would
It's a
actually,
lot.
I would think that issue 3 maybe ends at Final Crisis. Like, I don't know how it,
Maybe.
like,
And then beyond that, like you're talking about going into like the 2010s with New 52, obviously, but even before then, Blackest Night, everything to do with the lantern stuff we learned, everything to do with that era. It's like it's a lot. It's a lot to get for we're talking about. You're talking about go through the 90s, go through the 2000s. It's a big chunk of time. So I wonder if that is just going to be the core focus of issue 3, all of that big chunk of information, just how grand that era was.
also keep in mind that the theme of Infinite Crisis is that Earth 2 Superman and Alexander Luthor and all those guys, Superboy Prime, feel that like the modern DC Earth is too dark, right? That
Yeah.
it's not so issue 3 has to go over the dark aspects. And if it does,
Yeah.
maybe they do, yeah, go over Darkest Night. And they have to go over like Bane breaking Batman's back and Superman dying and like all these and like Parallax and all that stuff. Like maybe yeah, I don't know. Maybe that's the thematic kind of thing.
I think it might be. I think it might be. It'll just be truly interesting to see, like, man, ending just issue 2 by Crisis on Infinite Earths. It's a lot. It's a lot to tackle going forward here in a way that you don't also want to rush through. Like, I appreciate how much was given to like Origins and showing that, but I almost wonder if maybe add a bit more post talking about Crisis on Infinite Earths to give yourself some room to be like, all right, a little bit of breathing room. Now we can kind of at a nice steady pace here go through the rest of everything else.
Yeah. I'm showing oh. Okay. I'm looking at the covers of issue number 3 and
Mm.
it shows the death of Superman, but it's not the death of Superman, it's the death of Superboy, which means it has to
Yeah,
include Infinite Crisis. Like that's the death of Superboy.
right. Yeah.
And then
Okay.
it's also bringing
So,
up Impulse and Jaime Reyes Blue Beetle.
right.
So that has to be the Jaime Reyes Blue Beetle gets introduced because of Infinite Crisis. So
Mhm.
we're also dealing. We see Sinestro and the Sinestro Corps outfit on one of these variant covers.
Yeah.
So it has to get at least as far as Infinite Crisis, but it also has Doctor
Yeah.
Manhattan on the cover.
Okay. So then we might be getting that far. So that's
We can't be
it.
getting
Might
as far as Doomsday Clock. That'd be ridiculous.
That'd be ridiculous. But I wonder if at least as far as
Watchmen.
addressing and talking about Flashpoint, and maybe up to like when Rebirth starts, something like that, at the very least.
Yeah. On also cool thing is on one of these the variant covers that has like a bunch of people on it, Hardware is there. So in
Oh,
issue number 1 we see um Icon coming to Earth. Hardware, being another milestone character, is on the cover of this. And I'm sure Static appears in issue 3.
yeah. Okay. So then we'll definitely be going over that too. So, I mean, I think this next issue is going to be unbelievably packed, like with information. Like, I think
Yeah.
that this one was establishing what the Justice League and Justice Society were, the teams, and how things kind of formed. I think this next one is going to be even more jam-packed than the first one was with information. I think it's going to be by far probably the most, maybe even messy of them, just with the amount of information they'll have to cover. And even if it's just skimming over it to let you know, there are still so many things to cover.
Yeah. I don't know how they're going to do it. Because, like,
Me neither.
what happens in issue 4?
I
Like,
gotta think issue 4 is like a discussion about up to current, you know what I mean? In
yeah.
some kind of way. So it's like you gotta hit as much as you can in issue 3.
Yeah. Issue 3 might be his toughest
Yeah,
feat,
by
you know?
far. Yeah, that's gonna be, I think that'll be by far the one I'm the most intrigued to see, just
It's
to see how he handles this.
it's everything post crisis.
Yeah, yeah. So good luck to Mark Wade with that one. We will see. I'm very curious.
Yeah. Interesting. Okay. Okay. Um, I've been loving these, man. I've been loving and also being able to like talk about it too, because like we're working through our thoughts as we're like talking to each other, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I think this has been really fun, especially because I think issue 1 was really great at like kind of just giving you the building blocks of, okay, let's get the cosmology stuff out of the way. Here's the starts. Fill in what you need to with that, but let's keep moving. And now we're really into the thick of it of explaining everything and explaining where these characters started off, these teams, these rosters, these lineups, the little tiny retcons here and there of these lineups. And I do wonder just like where we'll go with it, obviously, with these last 2 issues. But beyond that, I think these first 2 have been really fun just to play around with, like, what have they changed? Like, I've seen plenty of people that have been like, oh, I don't love that they changed this or that. And I'm like, I think it's one thing to talk about, like, what they changed and whether you liked it or not. I think it's way more interesting to talk about, like, through the lens of editorial and through the lens of Mark Waid, why that was changed
Right.
and for what reason. Because there's so many more interesting questions to that of like, all right, yeah, Cyborg, whether I like it or not, sure. I'm more interested as to the why, because there was deliberate choices made to make those choices. Like it's a very deliberate choice to change and flip flop his origins like that. And I think that that's something that even I have to think about now of like, what does that mean for the character when you're reading back? Like you have to think about these things of like when I'm reading back these things, the way I'm looking at it, it's kind of through a different perspective and lens now. And I think that that's really interesting. And just thinking about why Waid or editorial made that choice, I think that those are the really fun aspects of this book. That it's just like, okay, clearly a deliberate choice there. I wonder why.
Yeah. That's what we're tackling, right? Seeing it through
Mhm.
as a writer or as editorial, like what are the choices? I think also the idea that these are merging timelines, they're not rewriting timelines. So I thought, what could they have done? Could they have made Cyborg a kid original Teen Titan, like back with the original lineup, make Cyborg one of the founding members of Teen Titans? Yeah, but I don't think they were going to, because they're not creating new continuity. They're merging it, and anything that comes out of it can tell new stories. Sure, you get what I mean?
Yeah, 100%.
Like they
Yeah. And
could
I think
choose
that
to omit conflicting origin stories, but I don't think they're going to create a new origin story that makes the starting lineup of Teen Titans, the original 4 or 5, going to be Cyborg, Beast Boy, Starfire, Robin, you know? Like they're not making
right.
them the original Teen Titans.
Yeah, and I think it's been done well. Like I think that the merging has, because the first thing I thought to myself is, what are you going to put together of that new 52 beginning versus what we already kind of have had since pre new 52? And I think it's done in a way that like I'm like, okay, that makes sense. Like we were saying before, I think that there is definitive points made here, but also tons of sandboxes opened and areas for me to be like, oh, I can just assume that happened. That has a timeline spot where I can go and just assume that has happened.
Yeah.
And I think Wade's done a really good job of balancing that between what he's making clear and what is like, all right, you can assume things have happened there. Just, as long as it's not something abrupt, it makes sense.
Yeah.
I think that that has been done really well as a balance.
Yeah. They've also been creating teams that we haven't heard of. So that's a little bit different too. So
Yeah,
Justice Society Dark from issue number 1 of this,
right.
you know? All right.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah.
Um, I'm glad that you were on this episode to talk about this. I guess one final question, I think, on this final page, Supergirl dies in the crisis, right? Which Supergirl? I don't think it's our universe Supergirl. It has to be an alternate one, right?
It has to be. Yeah. That's the one that I'm very curious to see addressed because then they also leave it on the note of Barry talking about his death too. So I'm like, feels like we're going to come back to talking about these deaths in the beginning of the next issue, right? So that's the one area I was like, yeah, what Supergirl? It has to just be another universe Supergirl.
So they, and especially if they're bringing Infinite Crisis, it has to be Earth 2's Supergirl, right? Like it
It
has to be
has to
that
be.
Superman's Supergirl from Infinite Crisis.
It's the best way to like connect to the next point here of Infinite Crisis, right? Like that's the best way to go. All right, let's talk about these deaths. I died. This is a different universe. Supergirl, she died. Let's get into what this other universe is, what
Yeah.
Infinite Crisis is, what happened. It's like it's the best way you can transition. At least I would say.
Also, I realized they didn't bring up Power Girl, so
That's right.
we have to eventually get a Power Girl origin story because
So,
Power Girl has
a lot.
always been notoriously tough.
Yeah, I was gonna say that is a lot to handle for issue 3, which is why I'm like, this third issue is going to be a very big telling piece of
Yeah.
the entirety of this book.
Also, that was another character that had her origin changed because she couldn't be a survivor of Krypton. So she was a
Okay,
descendant of Atlantean magician, like magic users. That
interesting.
was her
That's
90s origin story.
what a weird change. That's a it's a unique one, but that's a very very out there. Okay, interesting.
It was weird.
Yeah,
I don't know. That whole like he has to be the last survivor of Krypton was such a weird.
yeah. It just felt like something where it's like I think we can make a few.
To edit that in post. But sorry, whatever you were saying. We'll end this. We'll end this in a minute. But what were you saying? Just real quick, I'll edit it.
I think I was. Oh, I was just fixing my wife. I think I completely forgot. I think I was just making the point that when you have to go through and change everyone else's origin just for it to make sense for him and keeping that same status quo, it's like maybe at a point we're overcorrecting. Let's just maybe leave it as is and leave a few exceptions.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you so much, Jack, for coming on this episode and talking about this issue with me. There's a lot to look forward to. I'm very excited for the 2 final issues of this series to come. I've been waiting for a long time for this. So, and being able to talk about it has been cool too. So,
Yeah,
thank you.
it's been a fun one. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. I think this has been one of my favorite books so far of just like the past couple months of DC. I think this is by far one of the most important ones and one that I just liked to learn and be more well like versed about. So it's always fun to talk about this one.
Yeah, yeah. For anyone out there who is watching and or listening to us, if you're watching us live, you're watching us on youtube.com/The Keeg Show. Or if you were listening to us on our podcast, it was Apple Podcasts or Spotify or iHeartRadio or Audible or Amazon Music or SoundCloud. However you're digesting us, whether it's by watching us or listening to us, like, comment, subscribe, follow, write a review, show us that you're out there. We'd love to know who's out there and who's watching and who's partaking in this. This was obviously a very, very deep dive into DC. But for some people, that's really interesting. For us, really interesting. For other people, maybe not. Maybe this is not the episode. But if you stuck around this long, hopefully that all made sense to you. Before we get going, Jack, where can we find you? What do you got coming up? Anything you want to plug?
Yeah, you guys can find me on YouTube and TikTok. I've got plenty of videos coming out this summer, a lot of big videos talking about Green Lantern history. So if you are very much fiending for DC history, got plenty of that in regards to Green Lantern coming up very soon.
Awesome, awesome. I had you on because you know a shit ton of shit. So thanks for bringing that on the show.
Of course.
For anyone out there, if you want to follow us on social media, well, if you want to follow me, this is Dimithri on Instagram. That's probably the easiest thing. But for the Keeg and the many shows that we do under the Keeg, this is the Keeg Talks, where we talk about movies, film, or big impactful things that are geek related. We do this, relatively every weekend, but who knows? It ebbs and it flows. But our most consistent show is Comic Talk, and it's every Thursday, 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern, on youtube.com/The Keeg Show or podcasts, where we talk about new comic books that came out that Wednesday. We talk about it on Thursday every single week. So, tune in for that. We also got some other shows that may or may not happen. So stay tuned for that. We just got done with San Diego Comic-Con, and that was really cool. And so I'm going to be posting some updates from that and the panel that we did there. That is pretty much it. Go to comicshoplocator.com, find a comic shop near you, support your local comic shops. Some of them, may not be your vibe. Find the comic shop near you that is your vibe. If you live in a very rural place, maybe you only have one choice of comic shop, and I hope they are cool. If they're not cool, let us know what comic shops are not cool, and maybe we'll do our due diligence and find you a shop near you that's a little bit better. But if you have options, find the cool one. Go to there. They deserve your love. I go to Comic Hero U in Southern California. There's also Golden Apple Comics in LA, and in Lake Forest there's Comic Quest. So those are like the three go-tos that I tend to go to. So do you go to you have a shop near you that you go to?
I go to Newberry Comics. That's my go-to. I go right at the mall. They always have all the most recent issues of everything, so that is my go-to.
What city is that?
That is in Connecticut, and there's one in Savannah, Georgia.
Okay, nice.
Yeah.
Thank you everybody out there for watching. Thank you, Jack, for coming on. Thank you to people out there for listening. Once again, I am your host, Dimithri Pereira, and this has been the Keeg Talks, the new history of the DC Universe, issue number 2. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.